Таким образом, российская система военно-технического сотрудничества не просто продемонстрировала
challenge Vladimir Putin to one-on-one, single combat.
Today we will discuss the biggest shutdown in modern military history. You know, Russia, which is described as the world's second largest army and boasts about its tanks and rifles. Well, that colossus entered a process on the night of February 10th, 2026, where a single button press, a single network access restriction, dramatically slowed down operational speed on the ground. Wow, what's going on, you're wondering, right? Let me explain. Elon Musk's pressure on Starlink and Ukraine's digital countermove cut off Russian forces from the satellite. And in that moment, that famous Russian army turned into a confused crowd, unable to hear each other, unsure where to fire their ammunition. The result? The Zaporizhzhia front began to fall like dominoes. Today on MrWARLOG, we decode the great escape that began in Zaporizhzhia with Russia losing its Starlink access, the critical rescues in Kosivtseve and Kharkiv, and how Putin's high-casualty attrition strategy became unsustainable, costing him more lives than he gained. Nerves are frayed at the Kremlin, scandals are erupting, and that big question is now being whispered on Moscow's streets. Is this the end for Putin? Sit back. Today you won't see how technology can revive an army, but how its absence can destroy it. The MrWARLOG operation begins. Hold on tight. Today we have not just any ordinary news, but a leaked report that will rewrite modern war history. That truth, whispered to the press behind closed doors by one of NATO's top officials, shattered the Kremlin's invincibility armor in a single stroke. The NATO official openly admits, Ukraine is making unprecedented progress on the Zaporizhzhia front at a speed previously unimaginable. So what changed? Did Russia run out of weapons? Russia ran out of sense. The moment Russian troops lost access to the Starlink network, their entire complex logistics and military communications network evaporated. Yes, at Ukraine's request, Elon Musk removed all Starlink terminals used illegally by Russia from the whitelist overnight. The result? Those famous Russian command centers on the Zaporizhzhia line were plunged into darkness in a second. This situation, described by a NATO official as a predicament, is a complete nightmare for Russian soldiers. Think about it. You have bullets, you have tanks, but you have no satellite connection to tell you where to fire those bullets. So what did this disconnection change on the ground? This is the truly shocking part. The moment Ukrainian forces realized the Russians were suffering this digital paralysis, they pressed the button. Russian artillery, which used to race against the clock to get coordinates, is now back to 1940s methods with pen and paper. A NATO official emphasizes, any alternative Russia is trying to develop can't even come close to the instantaneous data speed Starlink provides. Do you know what that means? Ukraine's move didn't just slow the Russians down, it put them into a strategic coma. The progress made by Ukrainian forces in Zaporizhzhia is no longer a counteroffensive. It is the death throes of a giant whose nervous system has collapsed. The moment Musk flipped the switch marked the beginning of the end for Russia in Zaporizhzhia. Ukrainian Defense Minister Mikhailo Fedorov's statement that "we are seeing the real results on the ground" is not in vain. A NATO official also confirms, the Russians have now become living targets on the ground, shouting to each other to communicate, unable to fly their drones, and abandoning their own positions due to lack of coordination. This leak proved to the world that the fate of the war lies not in bullets, but in that invisible signal. Now the real question is, can Russia emerge from this digital darkness, or will Zaporizhzhia be the first domino to fall? So what happened on the ground? Imagine this. You have the world's most advanced army. Thousands of your drones are flying around, but someone comes along and pulls the plug on that satellite. At that moment, that massive technological power turns into a useless pile of plastic in a second. Shocking reports from Euromaidan Press, with Elon Musk's whitelist operation on Starlink terminals, all of the Russian army's biggest weapon, the Kamikaze drones, were grounded overnight. So what exactly does this return to the Stone Age mean? Russia was using the Starlink terminals it had obtained through illicit means not only for communication, but also to remotely control its infamous Shahed and Molnia drones in real time. The moment the signal was cut, those death machines, traveling at 200 kilometers per hour, lost control and began crashing into empty fields.
На всем фронте интернет. То есть, блядь, мы не можем пользоваться Starlink'ом. Теперь...
A Ukrainian brigade spokesperson summed up the situation. Those drones that used to buzz overhead are now crashing to the ground like bricks. This is no malfunction, my friends. This is the gouging out of an army's eyes in the sky. You saw Charter 97's headline, which hit like a slap in the face. Russian army returns to the Stone Age. Why? Because with Starlink gone, the Russians are stuck with the cumbersome radios and courier systems of the 1940s. As Ukrainian military spokesman Viktor Trehubov said, "We have our problems, but theirs are a complete catastrophe." Command and control on the Russian side has taken such a heavy blow that a platoon leader can no longer give coordinates to the artillery behind him. Drone operators interviewed by Al Jazeera liken the Russians to blind puppies right now. No image, no data, no speed. Drones that used to reach speeds of 270 kilometers per hour have been slowed to 75 kilometers per hour due to signal restrictions and are now being hunted down by Ukrainian infantry with rifles. Wow, how did Ukraine take advantage of this opportunity? Here's the real bombshell. During those critical 48 hours when the Russians were experiencing this technological paralysis, Ukraine launched a massive counteroffensive, particularly along the Zaporizhzhia and Dnipro lines. The Russians couldn't even see the Ukrainian armored vehicles approaching because their drones weren't flying. Where the signal ended, Russia's famous invincibility myth also ended. Now Russian commanders are desperately shouting over the radio, soldiers are firing at each other, and a whole army is disappearing into a digital darkness. Today is the day to redraw the maps. Elon Musk flipping the Starlink switch and the Russian army reverting to the Stone Age was not just a technical glitch. It was the massive door that the Ukrainian armed forces had been waiting for months to open wide. Victory news is coming in one after another. The Ukrainian armed forces have completely liberated the strategic city of Kosivtseve in the Zaporizhzhia region. So, why is Kosivtseve so important? Kosivtseve was not just a city. It was a nerve center, where all of Russia's logistics supply routes, ammunition depots, and command centers in that region converged. The Russians were defending this city like a fortress, using real-time data they received via Starlink. But the Starlink outage dealt such a blow that the Russians couldn't even request ammunition to defend the city. When Ukrainian tanks entered the city, it was reported that some Russian soldiers were still trying to call for help via radio from the non-functioning terminals, but they couldn't reach anyone. Just imagine, the enemy is at your doorstep, but even your cries for help are lost in the silence of the sky. Wow, is it over? No. News of victory spread north to the Kharkiv region. According to Charter 97 data, that strategic location in Kharkiv is now under the Ukrainian flag. Russia had deployed its most elite troops and modern equipment to hold this region. However, when communication was cut off, the vital link between commanders and soldiers was severed. The Ukrainian army exploited this Russian deafness so effectively that Russian troops were surrounded without even understanding where the attack was coming from. So, what does the liberation of these cities tell us? All these victories can be seen as the first pieces of that great domino effect that will change the course of 2026. My friends, today it is not just the flags that have changed in these cities. Today it has been confirmed once again that it is the war of information, not bullets, that wins. Now the real question is, how many more cities will Russia lose due to this digital blindness? Or is this just a preview of a collapse that will extend all the way to Moscow? My friends, today I will tell you about the darkest, most merciless, and almost nightmarish part of the war, the Bermuda Triangle near Hulyaipole. This is a black hole where the Russian army was destroyed not only physically, but also technologically. According to Charter 97's shocking reports, Ukrainian border guards systematically eliminated a group of Russian soldiers they had surrounded in this area, completely isolating them from the outside world for a full 54 days. So why did the siege last exactly 54 days? Here's the crucial point. the Russians' notorious dependence on Starlink. The besieged Russian unit became deaf and blind the moment Starlink signals were cut off. They couldn't coordinate logistical aid from outside, couldn't send their location to reinforcements, and most importantly, couldn't hide from the Ukrainian drones watching them overhead. For 54 days, they waited for a signal inside that tiny triangle and died. Wow, did no one come to their aid for 54 days? No! Because the Starlink outage created such a data vacuum that the Russian command couldn't even pinpoint the exact location of this unit. This Bermuda Triangle in Hulyaipole became the most concrete proof that in modern warfare, where data ends, life ends too. This operation, patiently carried out by the border guards, ended on the 54th day with the complete annihilation of the Russian group. Starlink's silence meant more than just the loss of internet for those soldiers. It was the silent signing of their death warrants. Friends, today we are deciphering not just a war strategy, but how a state views its own people as statistical data. Ukrainian Commander-in-Chief Syrskyi lifted the veil on the horrific increase in Russian casualties during his latest press briefing. According to Syrskyi, the main reason for the geometric increase in Russian casualties is the technological blindness we just discussed. Russian troops cut off from the Starlink network are now nothing more than live targets. No coordination means no escape. No data means no defense. So, how does the Financial Times interpret this situation? This is where the real dagger pierces your heart. According to the FT's shocking analysis, Putin is currently in such a dead end that for every inch of land he gains, he sacrifices more soldiers than he has to hold that land. So, mathematically, this is not a victory, but a strategic suicide. Putin is trying to fill the huge gap in his army, which has been blinded by the Starlink outage, not with modern equipment, but with people. This is what we call in military literature a high casualty attrition strategy. Wow, what kind of impact do you think this situation has had within the Kremlin? According to information obtained by Charter 97, a huge scandal has erupted in Russia because of an order given by the Kremlin to the army. Allegedly, due to a lack of coordination, units that wanted to retreat were ordered to be fired upon by the barrier units behind them. In other words, Putin is telling his soldiers, who are blinded by Starlink, either you will die or I will kill you. This is not just a scandal, it is the decay of a system. This is a domino effect. So, is Starlink just the tip of the iceberg? Friends, so far we have discussed the chaos caused by the Starlink outage and the collapse in Zaporizhzhia. But let's look at the picture from a broader, more original perspective. Because what is happening here is not just an internet outage. It is the complete stripping away of the massive technological armor that the Russian army has cherished for the past 20 years. Starlink was actually a shiny band-aid covering all of Russia's technological shortcomings on the ground. When that band-aid was removed, the rotten, rusty, and cumbersome Soviet legacy underneath was exposed in all its nakedness. So, what's the real issue that makes you go, wow? Consider this. Russia needed Starlink not just for messaging, but to guide all its smart munitions, which rely on Western microchips and civilian GPS networks. When Starlink access was cut off, Russia's stockpiles of billions of dollars worth of missiles and smart bombs instantly turned into fireworks that lost their way. According to a leaked Reuters analysis, Russia's domestic navigation system, GLONASS, has been crippled by Ukraine's electronic warfare (EW) attacks. The Russian army had resorted to Starlink because GLONASS was not working. Now that refuge has collapsed on their heads. What is even more shocking is that Russia is losing not only data, but also time. In modern warfare, seconds are life-saving. When Ukrainian forces receive coordinates from a satellite and relay them to artillery, the process takes 30 seconds. For a Russian unit stuck with Starlink, the same process takes a full 20 minutes using old-fashioned radios and map coordinates. 20 minutes. In modern warfare, 20 minutes is more than enough to completely wipe out a battalion. This situation shows us that Russia may have one of the world's largest armies, but that army is no longer real-time. Russia is trying to fight at 1980 speeds in 2026. Ukraine, on the other hand, is moving at the speed of light. Starlink's arrival is a digital acid effect that is melting away all of Russia's strategic muscles on the ground one by one. The real wow factor is that Russia no longer has the industry to close this technological gap, nor does it have an ally that can produce those chips. The Kremlin is trapped in a cyber nightmare, and every button it presses to wake up explodes in its hands. My friends, today we saw that having the world's largest army is not stronger than the hand that holds its plug. Russia's loss of Starlink access was not just an internet outage, it was a strategic brain death for the Kremlin. The retreating troops in Zaporizhzhia, the liberated Kosivtseve, and that human meat grinder where Putin lost more than he gained all point to one truth. The signal is gone, the data has stopped, and the end of the game is in sight for Moscow. The tension in the Kremlin is actually the closing sound of an era. Because in the digital age, an army that remains deaf is doomed to be buried in the dusty pages of history. So, do you think Putin can rise from this digital grave? Or is this interruption the end itself? Let's meet in the comments. I'm Charlie from the MrWARLOG team. Goodbye.